Now we're at the next segment. Every year we like to talk about, it's a hallmark of all of our RDK Summits, case study. Who is doing what with RDK? How are they doing it? And we ask for our community members to come on stage to talk about their experience, either deploying or helping a deployment. This next segment is going to discuss RDK for video deployment at BCN India. And it'll share some of the key steps in that journey and highlighting the important role of telemetry, let's say, that's helped with defining and refining that customer experience. And to do so, I will invite to the stage a very good partner of ours, Nitin of Tata Elxsi.
Thank you so much, Z. Good morning, folks. Hope you can hear me. Yeah, it's good to be back here at the RDK Global Summit and Amsterdam, of course. In my role as the Chief Strategy Officer of Tata Elxsi, I'm fortunate to have a very unique view of the world, right? Because we work across industries. We work with some of the best brands in every industry that we work in, whether it's a Mercedes, a BMW, a Jaguar Land Rover in the automotive, whether it's a Medtronic, a Bayer, a GE in the healthcare, and of course, a whole set of you in the media and telecom industry. So it's wonderful to have this ringside view of how technology and business models are both shaping and responding to customer demographics, consumer preferences, and more. Right? Last year when I stood here, I actually took that insight to relate the journey of the automotive industry in the path of democratizing open source software and standardization, and how, in many ways, RDK represents the equivalent in the media and telecom industry, right? And the need for this whole democratization. So, if you look at what I talked of the fact that RDK really enables operators with a ready foundation. There's a whole lot of work that has been done by the RDK management team along with a whole set of partners to make sure that there is a whole set of accelerator kits and acceleration that is offered. There is the opportunity for continuous innovation with software. And of course, the growing ecosystem that's now powering the democratization, right? Equally, I'm glad to see that whole proliferation of devices, right? We had set-top boxes, we had gateways, we have cameras, we now have smart TVs, led by, of course, Sky Glass and the fantastic experience that that provides. Equally, when I look at it across transport streams, right? And again, while we've always started with DOCSIS, you now have DSL, you have GPON. I'm sure my colleagues from Deutsche Telekom would relate their success with the adoption of RDK or GPON and how they're driving that across countries. And of course, with fixed wireless access. And of course, the proliferation of the chip vendors too. Of course, I just have a few names here. I know there are more on the path to delivering on RDK, and we hopefully are powering some of them as Tata Elxsi. But that's really the journey, right? Equally, when I look at it from a regional perspective, there is always this perspective that, look, RDK has been the domain of the big boys. Of course, you have Comcast, you now have Deutsche Telekom, you have Liberty Global, you have Vodafone. You have adoptees across the world, but there's this big white space in Asia. While demographically it hosts the largest population of consumers that you would ever have, and the growth of consumers that you would have, there's this big white space that's not covered, right? And I think that is what we are delighted to now talk about, the fact that we're now driving the footprint of RDK, starting with India, and starting with a small regional operator there, right? And that's the story that I'm going to relate, and then I'm going to build on to a little bit of foresighting, given the fact that I represent strategy and not sales, right? If you look at what we've done with the small regional operator, and I'll talk of the context as we get along. We've looked at an ISP who had about just under 1 million users, one small part of India. If you understand India, 25 states, this particular operator represents less than a state within that country, right? That regional, just cutting across 2-3 languages, very, very rural audience and so on and so forth. And therefore, you would automatically assume and associate a lot of things with that, right? Very picky audience, very cost sensitive, ability to deliver premium content, premium services. And the question is, why do you have such an operator adopting RDKV? And that's the journey here. What we really did was, of course, we delivered RDKV, supported by the acceleration that the community provides. We delivered an entire video backend, right, that provides the end-to-end video delivery system that is required. Very rich telemetry that sits on top to leverage the power of data. And most importantly, also companion apps across iOS, Android, and so on, because you're talking of demographics where you have younger audiences who prefer OTT, and you have the older audiences who prefer a large screen experience, right? And if I were to then look at behind the scene or under the hood, if you may, you have a whole set of partners that we worked with, delivering this integration, right? So right from CDN to transcoding to metadata to ad tech, we have put together a very, very complex set of solutions to deliver an end-to-end video experience that would transform the way this operator operates, right? And again, when I look at it for what is it that this particular deployment is delivering to the operator, it ticks all the 5 Cs, because I talked of this last year, that why does RDK make sense? And in my mind, it ticks all the boxes. Because when you look at content, you need the ability to aggregate content, not just global content, not all the popular stuff, very, very local, regional content that you need to deliver. And we have been on a journey of integrating app after app, content after content provider in India. Some of them so local, so regional that they just cover a district or two, right? Choice, the ability for this operator now to deliver OTT, video on demand, and live TV all together, seamlessly. A very, very regional crafted UX that our design teams, and we have an award-winning design team, has actually delivered for this particular operator. And more importantly, the quality of service that is promised by one, deploying an incredibly robust stack and experience, but more importantly, the power of data behind, right? Of course, convenience and cost. And that is one of the interesting realizations that we've had, right? That you have a trade-off between convenience and cost, and you will find that consumers do not mind paying that extra dollar, provided you're delivering that convenience and that option of content and choice that they need, right? And that's been a very, very interesting learning in terms of that whole debate between should you go for something other than RDK, what are the alternatives there, aren't those boxes cheaper, and so on. And you find there are compelling arguments to say, look, if you're looking at total cost of ownership, you're looking at your overall business models and long-term sustainability, the control that RDK gives is the prime driver. And it's not just control over software, it's control over business models, it's control over the app ecosystem, it's control over the subscribers that you have on board, right? And I think it's ticked all the boxes for this particular operator. It's been an absolute delight. Not easy, as you can tell, because it's a complex deployment, but a wonderful journey of getting somebody as small as that, who's not technologically sophisticated, but to work at the levels of the business owners to tell them why RDK makes sense and to get them to adopt and deploy, right? I've shown this before. It delivers you a ready foundation, innovation, and value adds. But what I think we are also starting to see, and here is where I wear my strategy hat, is the power of data. And it's for the first time that we're starting to see across operators, but really, if you ask me, across industries, the power of data now being harnessed, not just to improve experience, but actually to innovate business models and services, right? And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here. If you look at that block on top, we have a telemetry module that's called ICX, Integrated Customer Experience, that essentially delivers very advanced analytics along with over-the-air updates that plugs into an RDK deployment, provides you with device KPI trends, works for your customer care, giving you a single view of a device, telling you status even as you get a call. It works for ops teams, allowing ops teams to kind of look at regional deployment, looking at targeted software updates and so on and so forth. A very, very sophisticated software that's now deployed. And this is where I get back to the topic that I was talking of. Data speaks and AI listens. Because the way I look at it is, you have the ability now to harness data from multiple sources. In this particular case, the entire telemetry that RDK delivers. But the real path and the real value is as you infuse that with AI and drive automation, drive very specific business intent with actions. Right? So whether it is self-healing, and we are not self-healing everything right now, so ops guys still have a job. But the idea ultimately is to be able to progress towards what we would call a dark knock, right? Which does not necessarily have people. It is fully automated, and it is overseen and monitored by people. The ability to take software and drive targeted updates based on the context of the user, the context of the box, the context of what they have subscribed to. And equally, very rich data that we're now getting off this particular ICX module that actually tells you, with, of course, the appropriate anonymization, who's watching what, and therefore what makes sense to promote, what makes sense to pull back, what makes sense to add into bundles, and so on and so forth. So we're actually driving not just operations, not just great customer care, we're actually now driving business models and marketing and promotions of bundles. Equally, if I were to step back and look at that whole deployment diagram again, you will see that whole white box in between, which represents the end-to-end video backend that we've put together called TEPlay. Now, within TEPlay, you have modules. Now, whether you look at IntelliPlay, you look at ULike, you look at EngageX, now these are module names for what goes into that big box that we call the video backend. Essentially, it's a very, very sophisticated data management system that is pulling together data from across devices, whether it's an iOS, Android, the set-top box, the RDK device, the CDN, the content management systems, the subscriber management systems, and it's processing this for very specific intent again, right? And the whole point I'm making here is that you can have access to data, but it is your business intent, your purpose, that drives the use of AI for very specific purposes, right? So recommendation engines, which are automated, to be able to look at users, look at past history, look at content viewing preferences, and drive and suggest what they should be watching next. IntelliPlay, where you're doing deep audience research to be able to, again, drive actionable insights for marketing. EngageX, again, about analytics that is looking at engagement levels and then driving notifications, messages, personal offers, and so on and so forth, right? And I think this is the power that you get. The power not just to be able to have open source, to have control, to innovate, and so on. The innovation driven with the purpose being consumers and money. Right? And I think that is the most powerful tool that you now provide with the adoption of RDK, which is what we're helping customers with. Right? And now I wear my strategy hat and I step back. Because the way I look at it, we have all of this. We have very specific modules driving very specific intent, very specific AI models. But if I were to abstract it, I actually have the power to aggregate everything that is going on in the network. You're truly talking of a data lake that now aggregates across EPG, across content, across network, across the watch history and click streams, across the subscriber data that you have, search history and cookies, especially if they're using third-party mobile devices, as well as the logs that you get from RDK and telemetry. And what does that power give you? And what does that need? The way I see it, while we have been working with a whole set of the lead operators who've gone ahead and deployed RDK and deployed at scale and scaled across countries, there has always been a need for a software factory that accompanies it, right? Because that innovation, that keeping on tip of the trunk, that ability to drive new features and experiences does require a software factory. To my mind, we're now starting to see an accompanying AI and data factory that sits alongside. Right? And that is where we see the world going. And what is that about? Almost a new operating model for the data-driven organization. Consistent data ingress and governance policies, because you're dealing with fairly complex regulatory environments that are coming up. You're dealing with different laws across different countries, both in terms of how you manage data, how you manage personal information, and so on and so forth. And how do you make sure that you're getting all of this right? Right? How do you make sure that you're compliant and yet being able to harness everything that you have? How do you get out from the silos of ICX, which is only looking at NOC, which is only looking at customer care, versus something like a recommendation engine, which is equally rich in data in terms of consumer preferences, but is only doing recommendations? You're not putting the two together. Right? And I think that is what is now being conceptualized and being brought together in the concept of not just a software factory, but really an AI and data factory. Right? And of course, you will find that just as much as your software requires CI/CD, you will set up DevOps to drive your AI. You will set up MLOps to continuously train, prevent drift, and manage your AI models that are being deployed. Right? And we are seeing this across industries. Benefits, of course. There's a very, very large benefit, first of all, of optimizing compute, especially if you don't want to pay too much money to the AWSs or the Azures or the GCPs, by creating multiple copies of the same data simply because different teams want to access and process that. But starting with those basic benefits of optimization, we see much larger benefits of truly differentiated innovations arising from the ability to see data altogether, to be able to process this together, right? And a better AI syndication. Right? In fact, I'm going to step one step forward. The way we see it is that we're already building a digital twin for the device. Right? With ICX, we are there with a digital twin for the device that is deployed in the network, covering the state of health and covering every parameter that represents the device in a virtual environment. With our modules on the TEPlay and related, we are now being able to create an avatar, and I'm calling it an avatar of the consumer, a digital version of the consumer, simply because you cannot represent the consumer exactly for various reasons of anonymity and privacy, but you can create a digital avatar that now gives you a real representation. Right? And where we are taking it, and I call it the digital Trinity, is that if you are able to couple it with not just the device and the user, but infuse the rest of the network and the network data in, you're truly creating something different. Right? And that can drive differentiated offerings. That can drive differentiated business models, and even service levels. Just in case you thought I'm talking through my hat, maybe I'll step back, right? And I'm going to cut across industries. I'm going to step into the automotive industry. We work with some of the best car companies in the world. And believe me, as the world moves to EV and moves to electric vehicles, the single most important parameter for a fully plug-in electric vehicle would be range. Right? And when we started, we have AI models that were looking at the state of health of the battery, the degradation over a period of time, and we were doing range prediction using that. That was a journey about 3 years back, not very long back. Look at the sophistication of the AI models that are running today. We have state of health of the battery. We have state of health of the thermal management systems that are cooling the battery. We have data coming in from the environment in terms of weather and temperature outside. We have data that is coming in from navigation, which is talking of what is the route ahead. Because the range is not so much about what it is, it's about where are you going to go. Is it going to be uphill? Is it going to be winding roads? Is it busy traffic? And that is determining your range. Going further, one more, to the amount of air that your tires have. Are they underinflated? Are they overinflated? And lastly, driver behavior. How is this driver? Does he drive in eco mode? Does he drive in sports mode? Does he provide for regenerative braking? So what has happened is as simple an algorithm as range prediction, which logically says, look at the battery levels, look at the age of the battery, and you have an algorithm there, is now being infused with data from consumers, data from the entire system, not just the battery, and the whole journey of where you're going to go, the future and not the past, right? And this is where we believe, even as we in the automotive industry start to build digital twins for the car and digital twins for the users, we believe there's an equivalent context in the media and telecom industry to be able to actually use this as a converged model. The other thing that I'll relate in the context of an AI data factory is that as we were working with OEMs, you had engineering analytics teams, you had engineering AI teams. What are they responsible for? They were supposedly responsible only to deliver an AI model that kind of predicted battery degradation and battery levels. The business analytic teams were sitting separately, either with the CIO organization or with the CDO organization, and they were responsible for putting business models together, which said, how do I take some of this data that is coming out, some of these AI models, and monetize it? How do I monetize it? For example, we worked in India to deliver insurance-based analytics, right? So your car insurance now is usage-based. Now, this must be prevalent in other parts of the world, but believe me, for India, it's a big thing. Because for the first time, you have an insurer who's saying, I will work with my OEM through the connected car and the data that they are gathering. I'll be able to tell driver behavior, and I'll be able to tell how hard the car is being used. And at the end of the year, I'll have a dynamic package put together which says, this is your insurance. And here are also points for you. If you drive better, you'll see your insurance reduce. If you drive worse, you know what's going to happen. Right? And this is truly a business model innovation that is being driven by the fact that the car company can now gather data, build AI models on top, provide third parties with abstracted information, which allows them to craft businesses. Right? And I believe there's a great opportunity here for where this is going. Right? Of course, last word from Gen AI. We are doing a fair amount of work with Gen AI, and believe me, the AI and data factory will fundamentally involve that. I'm not going to say that we are creating the next world. We've started with fairly targeted use cases, especially in engineering, with log analysis, with ticket categorization, with interactive UX. So these are things that we are already implementing and piloting for certain customers. We are also seeing smart triaging. We are seeing testing being transformed for sure. Code, I still don't want to go there, right? I don't want to get all my friends in the software industry out of a job. But we're definitely seeing implementation step by step, whether it's in UX, whether it is in the way you develop, or it is in the way you triage and operate. And of course, we're starting to also see some use cases where you can drive generative AI for self-healing. Right? So I'm going back to the AI models that we had in ICX. That was very specifically for operations. It was intended to be applied AI, not Gen AI, but we're now starting to see applications for Gen AI. Right? So with that, I'm going to stop. My session was really about the fact that, one, when I was here last year, we were promoting the cause of democratization. We're saying, look, there's an opportunity for more operators to adopt RDK. And with VCN and with our win in India, we truly see that happening, driven by the power of what I think all of you are doing, enriching the community, enriching options and solutions for the community by RDKM in terms of delivering accelerators. To the point that, in fact, if I may, I no longer call it RDK as a reference design kit. I actually call it a rapid deployment kit. Because you got to a point where the communities got together enough to be able to actually build a blueprint, like the way you saw what we've done, to actually create a rapid deployment kit for customers to adopt. Right? With that, thank you.
Well done, Nitin. Well done. Take some time to answer some questions, if you could.
This particular operator uses the data and examples.
Do you mind just repeating that? The mic went out for a sec.
Oh, yep. Okay. Yeah, the question is about how does the operator use the data? Any examples? I will still say that it's early days for this particular operator. Why? Because we've just kind of rolled out deployment and we'll have to ramp up. And as you understand, a lot of this depends on the data that you've collected over a period of time. But having said that, most immediate implications are in terms of, as you deploy, how do you see your deployment in terms of the versions that you've deployed across various homes? Where are there problems? How can you identify that as a regional problem that is affecting multiple users or a very specific customer? It has definitely transformed customer care because this particular customer did not have a customer care team because we are rolling this out for the first time. I believe we've had the leanest customer care team ever in history. Why? Because the way we're deploying it, the kind of dashboards that you get, the kind of diagnostics that you get, you're able to run extremely lean operations and extremely lean customer care. But as far as business models go, I think we'll have to wait a little time for data to accumulate because I still need to understand consumers. I need a little bit of history of what consumers are preferring, how the wash patterns are, before we start to roll out further data-led or AI-led benefits of creating new bundles, of new promotions, and so on and so forth. Right? So I think we're just a little early in that journey there, simply because just got about deploying it. But if I were to step back and look at other operators where the deployment is a lot more mature, I would imagine that all of this is already in play. Any other question? Thank you.
Thank you, Nitin. Always a pleasure. Thank you.